need to get going. And pull these out here. I call to order the Salem Kaiser Area Transportation Study for Tuesday, August 23rd, 2022.
Here, Clark, can I just mention something quickly?
Yes.
We all know that the meetings are recorded.
Yes.
The video is recorded. But there's also the chat feature in Zoom. I just want to let people know on the call that the chat is recorded and we keep the chat record as part of the meeting materials. So just to let you know, if you're using the chat, whether you're using it the public chat or otherwise, we have a recording of the chat. Although we don't have a recording of like one-to-one chats, the chats do. So, and we could have discussions about what we want to do with chat later on. We may want to disable it, but that's for another discussion.
Right, and just for the record, that sidebar conversations through chat is not something that we all agree is something we want to do. We want to have one meeting with everybody engaged. In meetings where that has not been easy to do, they've just turned the chat off, but we like to keep it open if we want to put in links and other informational pieces that can be shared easily with everybody. And as long as we are agreed that that's how we're going to use the chat, I think that can be a very constructive tool. But at some point, if it becomes an issue of sidebars and so forth, then I think we as the policy body would have to have that conversation on how to use that. All right, thank you for that. For the record then, for roll call. So I'm Kathy Clark, Chair, Mayor of the City of Kaiser. For Salem, who's on? Salem's not present. Marion County.
Look like it.
Okay, Maria's about 5 minutes away. She'll be attending in person. Okay, so we will watch for her and we'll mark her present when she arrives. For transit, we have
Sadie Carney.
Sadie. For Turner, we have,
Steve Horning.
and for Polk County,
Lyle Morhorst.
and for ODOT.
Dan Fricky sitting in for Anna Henson today.
Good to see you, Dan. Everybody?
No, who just came into the room? Was it one of our?
Mark Bernard.
Oh, okay.
Okay. All right, then the first order of business will be to approve the minutes from the meeting on July 26th. Were there any additions or corrections to be noted? Otherwise, a motion to approve is presented.
So moved.
Moved
Second that.
Moved by Sadie, seconded by Lyle. Any further discussion? All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, signify by saying no. And hearing no objections, so motion passes unanimously. That takes us to item C, public comment. And is there anyone from the public, i.e. not a member of the board, who would like to address the policy committee at this time? In the room? Yes. Would you like?
Hi, I'm Katrina. We'll be starting an internship hopefully fairly soon here. And I'm really pleased to be here. Thank you all for opening this up to the public.
Absolutely, thank you. Welcome, Katrina. And where do you come from? What program?
I'm a senior at Willamette University.
Fantastic. Well, you chose a great place to come and intern, so welcome. All right, thank you. Anyone else for public comment? Okay, that takes us to item D, which is an informational piece from Mike Jaffe. Just want to let us know what we saw here under item D, SKATS bylaws and subcommittee formation. So
It's just informational, since the question was asked about subcommittees of the policy committee.
okay. So if anybody has any questions, they can email you with additional things that they want to understand how SKATS works. But this is a good background piece.
Right, I gave you the bylaws for both the policy committee and the TAC. And
Changing anything, you're just.
not change anything. Sometime in the future, we'll need to make some changes, but that's not for today.
Okay. So it's just to let people know kind of where we're at, because as we've been noting over the last several months, the makeup of the policy committee changed significantly over the last couple, 3 years. And I think I'm the last one standing from the old, been around for a while group. A little bit short as a quick kicker, but not by much. Okay, thank you all. Let's go to item E then, which is the our first action item today, which is the federal performance measure target setting. And Ray, thank you for sending out the
PowerPoint,
yeah, that thing,
that thing.
presentation stuff in advance as well, which makes it easy for people to see online.
And you can follow along.
Follow along, follow the bouncing ball, as they used to say.
But I will share my screen if I remember to share my screen.
So Kim, do you want this for everybody to know?
Yes.
Thank you.
So last month, I provided an overview of the federal performance measures that cover a range of road and transit issues. This month, we are talking about setting targets. Excuse me. And the memo goes into detail mainly on 2 of them that need to be set specifically for SKATS, the peak hour excessive delay and % non-single occupant vehicle travel. The other sets of performance measures we'll discuss after we deal with those 2. As a reminder, the targets for the non-peak hour excessive delay and for the 2 that we're not focusing on first, we can either agree to support the state or transit target, or we can set a specific target for SKATS. For these 2, we need to set a specific target because these 2 performance measures are specific to a metropolitan area. Statewide value doesn't make sense. So ODOT will be taking whatever targets we set, and they'll be reporting those to the feds, and they'll also be reporting central line NPOs as well. Just as a reminder, we also have reporting requirements for the performance measures and targets. And as part of your packet, I included Appendix P, which is the performance report, which provides an overview of all the performance measures, the targets that we set last time, and the outcomes for the performance period, which is 2022. And a reminder that there are no consequences, good or bad, if targets set by the MPO are not met. However, ODOT does have consequences. So, I don't think transit has any consequences. So the 2 new measures, as we discussed last month, are the % of non-single occupant vehicle travel and annual hours of excessive delay per capita. These are somewhat similar. They both address congestion to a degree. We need SKATS specific targets. We need targets for 2 years out and 4 years out for this reporting period, which covers up to 2026. And so we start in with data. And let me hide that so I can actually see it. So this is from the American Community Survey put out by the US Census Bureau. Each year, this is a 5-year rolling averages of the % of non-single occupant vehicle travel use within the Salem area, going back to 2010. And it's a little bit clearer on the graph that's also in your memo. And it's small on this screen, but you can see that over time, there has been a trend downwards in the % of non-single occupant vehicles, or conversely, an increase in single occupant travel. Of course, 2020 is the unique year, hopefully. And so things it bounced back up. And then you'll see that there's reddish, orangish colors are for the forecast tool in Excel, showing roughly where it thinks the trends are going.
And just want to pause really quick. I do want to acknowledge for the record that Trevor Phillips just entered the Zoom, so Salem is present, and welcome, Trevor. We're on item E, the better performance targets.
And so we talked about this with the TAC. They recommended that we provide both an aspirational target and a trend target. So the trend target is just as you see from the graph. It takes the trend that's happened for the last 11 years and extends it to 2026. The aspirational is more where we would like to go, you know, vis-a-vis the two performance measures. And so you'll see aspirational and trend for both of these. There is, the baseline is for 2022. We don't actually have data for 2022 for either of these. So I guesstimated what the baseline would be and then created the targets for 2024 and 2026 for both aspirational and trend. And Lori, Maria just walked in at this moment. So you can record that. So that's the first set of targets.
And right, we can only report one of them. We can't report both, right? We have to
So
pick.
you need to pick one, or for both of these, it's either the aspirational or the trend. And you can mix it up. But you can't mix it up, but each one is just aspirational or trend. Are there any questions on this performance measure and the targets, how they got, how I got through them, how we, discussion at the TAC, et cetera?
Okay, go ahead, Commissioner.
What is the benefits of choosing either or is there any? It doesn't sound to be a repercussion because they don't want to be accountable.
It's a way of tracking what happens. There are no repercussions. It's just, you know, there aren't. For these two, they're really, both are going to be adequate. The other unfortunate thing is it's a little bit difficult with the data that we have to actually forecast what it will be. So, and things are changing. So as I mentioned, COVID, right? And so we have a rebounding economy and how that might impact the percent of people who are driving by themselves or taking other means. There's also the issue with transit, and they are still recovering from COVID in regards to their ridership. So for at least this year and probably next year, that number will be depressed. So we would anticipate, you know, if we're just doing trends, that the numbers would go downward. But we can set them aspirationally to where we would like to be. And that's also.
It's kind of a policy choice, I guess, is why we come to you. You know, either one would suffice, as Ray said, but it's you as a policy group. Do you want to say we're going to follow kind of a numeric trend where we show the SOV percentage increasing, or do we want to say we think aspirationally it'll flatten out and be a little higher? So which of these two we feel more comfortable reporting to the federal highway, and like Ray was saying, not meeting either target is not a penalty at this point, but we do have to report something.
So can I flip this into what is our advantage? With the aspirational saying this is the direction we want to go, would that make us more competitive for grants, saying that these are grants that we are doing that help encourage or provide for more complete options for people to choose how they travel? Do we get any points for that?
So much. Well, I mean, so because this is based in part on what is already in the tip. So most of the projects are already there. So what would, I would say most projects that will impact these are there. The big unknown is the items that we have no control of. So how many people want to bike or want to take transit, or how the economy rebounds.
Well, there's also been a depressed a number of people wanting to share vehicles because of COVID, social distancing. We weren't allowed to on our jobs. It was just not allowed. Transit had to cut back, but, and I'm going to look to Sadie and to Steve Dickey, who I know is on here too, your number, the transit numbers have come back, I think, faster than anticipated. And with the addition of hours, staffing, and then now the addition of the student bus program. So I'm looking at how we can leverage our numbers to make us more competitive on a national basis. I see Sadie, your hands up.
I think that's such a good idea, Chair Clark. And I just want to point out, I think there is an aspect of how many people want to ride a bike or want to walk someplace, but it's also like the physical ability to do so in a safe environment. So it's not always the choice that we might make it out to be. It has to do with our transportation investments as well, how successful people are in being able to choose a more active mode. I'll let Steve speak to the transit recovery numbers, but I'm in an aspirational space. So I would be comfortable making that suggestion.
Thank you. Steve, do you want to talk a little bit about the recovery numbers there? If we're going to go aspirational, I'd like to know that we're not setting ourselves up for failure. And then I want to look to Dan, how, because apparently you do have consequences. How can we be of help to you?
Not for these.
Okay, not for these.
Not for these.
You good, Dan?
Yeah,
So-
I mean, I guess normally I'd say I'd be more inclined toward the trend just because that's the kind of thing I normally look at. But in this case, with all the, I guess some people might say unusual activities of the last few years, it may tend to, if you will, depress the trend a little bit. I'm not going to say one or another is better, but it seems like the trend may be based on some things that may or may not continue into the future.
Steve, I'm sorry I interrupted you.
And I would say, and likewise, the transit industry, you know, while we are seeing our numbers coming back, which is very encouraging, there's a lot of uncertainty as to what the long-term work world is going to do as far as the percentage of people who will remain in at least some level of hybrid telecommute type of arrangement and what that does to the impact on our use of our services. The other piece is also we are continuing to see a challenge in staffing to be able to staff to our full levels for our services. We have the budget and we were ready to go to 100% service level this September. It was simply because we have not been able to get enough applicants for our open positions for our operators, and we even have some open positions in our maintenance department. So there's a little pitch if anybody you know is looking for work. We certainly are hiring, but we did not feel confident that we would have adequate staffing to ensure that we could support 100% level. So we are going to a 93% level for this cycle. And then hopefully by the January cycle, we will be staffed at a level we can get to 100%. But even that has an impact because anytime you have any level of a reduction in service, you impact also your overall numbers.
Okay, so I think, and for the record, Marion County Commissioner has joined us, so we, I think, are at full strength.
And I would say, include that, you know, this, the values represent also telework.
Mhm.
So even if transit decreases, there's more people teleworking now or than there were 2 years ago or 4 years ago. Pre-2020,
Yeah.
whatever that was,
In the before times.
before times, yes, that.
Lyle.
So I guess being a team member and working around groups of people, I always like to set ourselves up for a show of success. So if we stay with the trend-based targets and we exceed that, because it sounds like they're trending down. So if we can maintain or exceed that, then it's kind of a moral victory. And I've always been after, give yourself a chance to succeed.
Okay. So at this point,
You can also split the difference.
Yeah.
These numbers are, you know, discussion points. So your three choices are really aspirational trend or possibly split the difference.
and the difference between them is pretty minimal. And we're all aspiring, especially with our planning within our different transportation system plans to aspire to more. How fast can, people like, cities like Kaiser build them? We need to build our corridors and so forth. When we build them, all of a sudden, we're going to be able to use them. Until the sidewalk is there and funded, we are going to continue to aspire to that. So I'm hearing a couple of different directions. We know what we want to do. We can put into a narrative that our goal is to aspire to more, but that we understand that the trends right now are not terribly helpful to us. But we want to acknowledge the reality and aspire and work together to aspire to more. We can put that in the narrative, but it sounds like adopting the current trend line as our baseline is a reality that we are dealing with, and then we can work toward increased system performance over the next 4 years. Because again, this is going to be refreshed in 4 years.
Well, and we'll also come back in 2 years and give you a midpoint report. And then at that point, you can change the targets or keep them as you want for both of these.
Okay, so these are adjustable in 2 years.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, and by then we'll have hopefully better data, trans will, figured out their employment issues, et cetera, et cetera. So Chair, do you want to do each one of these separately by motion?
Yes, let's break these out. So entertain a motion on the two. Where am I at? Thank you.
Well, it'd be something like set the target for % non-SOV to be X or Y. Or the trend numbers shown on the trend.
It's like the trend numbers
Trend numbers those represented on screen. And then
with a goal, with a, to adopt those, but with a goal to to work together to exceed those.
I'll make that motion.
Moved by Lyle, looking for a second.
I'll second.
Second by Trevor. Thank you. Any further discussion? All in favor, please unmute and signify. Oh, sorry, Sadie, I saw your hand.
So we're choosing the trend and our reasoning is it's the trend.
No, the reasoning is because at this point, there are a lot of unknowns yet in the data to, especially with transit and some of the other data regarding how the economy is going to shake out. And then we'll be able to make the adjustment in 2 years when we have 2 more years of data.
And then in 2 more years of data, it'll still only get us up to 2018 because we're looking at data that's from 2016 right now.
no.
I'm just trying to think of when we actually see like the effects of the pandemic and the recovery, and we're able to make decisions based on more recent data.
Well, after this year, we should have the 2021 numbers from the Census Bureau, and
Oh.
2022, we should have, or in 2024, we should have at least the 2022, hopefully the 2022 values as well for this
So
performance.
This
measure.
is based on decennial census data?
It's based on the 5-year rolling average from the American Community Survey, and it's reported
Okay.
yearly.
It comes out.
Yeah.
It's released
Oh.
each December. We
Yeah,
receive-
no, I'm familiar with ACS data, and I was just, when he said census data, I was like, oh, wow, that is a very crude measure that doesn't give us an opportunity to adjust to more current trends in real time at all, right? Because decennials every 10 years. And so these targets are tied to our performance measures, our federal performance measures. But we don't think that setting an aspirational target or a non-aspirational target has any bearing on how we might select projects based
Well-
on what we're aiming for. Or we do.
Well, over the next 2 to 4 years, the projects that will be built are already in the pipeline.
Mhm.
We can set, Now, the
Well, sure, but we're
Those
always
are-
gonna be able to say that, right? We're always gonna say,
Right,
oh, it's already in
well,
the
the-
pipeline, it's
and
already in the
the-
pipeline. So
and
like,
the-
when do we shift if we're always gonna be basing our assumptions on stuff that's like planned out ahead of us?
Well, you're also doing, well, I would say this year, the tip is a little bit different as there's the funding is going to the existing projects as opposed to funding new ones. So
And we're
Usually-
hopeful that will change, but that's the trend.
unfortunately, yes, hopefully the inflation rate will not increase
And
as
supply
much going
chain,
forward.
yeah.
Yeah,
Expensive.
it's a lot of unique circumstances happening at once.
And then in the narrative for this motion, it does say that we are going to continue to work within our individual jurisdictions toward increasing our ability to provide infrastructure to help increase the percentage of non-SOV.
I like
That's
that,
up to
but
the individual TSPs.
if we're working within our individual jurisdictions, why wouldn't we work collectively towards the aspirational goal?
That's.
I guess
what
I'm
this
just not
is.
understanding why we're choosing the trend.
We can change it back to choose aspirational.
Well, the motion has been made and seconded. I mean, if there is a desire by the group, then this motion will fail and then we'll move to the aspirational. However, as pointed out, either one is not going to change our standing with US DOT. And within our individual transportation system plans, we already have projects underway that are going to continue to positively impact this data point. It's just a
Yeah.
matter of getting them built.
Right, so it seems like if all of our individual plans are pointed toward the more aspirational outcome and shifting that trend line to something more positive, then the way we should be measuring our performance and setting targets so that we can measure our performance would be in keeping with our individual transportation plans.
Well, true, the funding is still something that we are still way behind on. And as Transit pointed out, as Steve pointed out, Transit's ability to continue to increase service is still a little bit of a question mark. So in 2 years, we can, as a group, look at where we're at and we can make adjustments. But it doesn't change what we are working on. What it does is just says, well, we're going to report to US DOT. Any further discussion? Steve, I see you unmuted, or is that just to vote? All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, signify by saying no.
I'd like to abstain.
Okay. So we have, I don't remember how many counts. We have seven votes aye and 1 abstention. Okay. All right, let's go on to the next one then. That is the,
Annual peak hour excessive delay per capita. Another new performance measure. So this applies only to the national highway system. So that's the interstate and the principal arterials within the area. This is the data that we get from RIDIS. So the INRIX collects the data from vehicles that have GPS, trucks, cars, connected cars, etc. And then they figure out, they do the calculation for us, and this is what we get. In 2019, as I mentioned in the memo, they increased the number of data points that they have, and so we see a decrease in the peak hour delay value as they increase the number of vehicles that were either faster. And going forward, this will more represent the data that we'll see in 2022 and 20, et cetera, into the future. Unfortunately, there is no 2022 data yet. And it looks like we won't have it until next year. And again, 2020 saw a decrease as a lot of people stayed at home and did not travel to work, etc. Looking into the future, there's the major construction is on I-5, Kubler to Delaney, starting in 2024. So we would expect some sort of impact. There's the recovering economy. There is, as Steve mentioned, transit's near-term employment of drivers issues. And so again, we have a trend and aspirational. Again, I just said had to make up a number for 2022. We saw nothing. So said that it's 7 hours. And so you can see which way the targets are going for both aspirational and trend. And I will say I have very low confidence in these values because they're new and they have a lot of things going on. And again, from the tech, there was no direction or recommendation on the withdrawal. So, and again, if you want aspirational, I think this is, I think this is the time. If you want baseline, that's also fine. It could also be, I will say that Eugene, in their MPO discussion, they started with a more aspirational, and then they were working more towards trend in their targets based on things that were happening in the larger economy.
So this only refers to I-5, Kubler, or I-5.
I-5, Kubler, Lancaster, Commercial, Wallace, or
Oh.
on two.
Yeah. Thank you. That was my question, Kathy.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, so, yeah.
So if you could do, which roadways are included in this? So you just really went fast. Can you go a little slower?
Sure. Well, basically any road that has more than 4 lanes.
4 lanes or
River,
more.
yeah, so River Road, Commercial.
Oh, River?
South, yeah.
Which River Road?
River North,
Thank you.
not River South. Commercial Liberty to Couplet, both sides. Or not 4 lanes. Ferry Trade, Lancaster, Silverton, Kubler, Corden, Hazel, Greenish, Lock Haven.
Hazel Greenish. Let a new one.
It's a bit of it going on.
We're gonna find a map to show this.
There was a map.
And can you, yeah, and if you could include that.
Yeah, I think in previous meetings this year, we've shown maps of the NHS.
Yeah, I think in the last, and if
No,
did you get the PowerPoints from last meeting?
Yeah.
It should, I thought it was in there.
Okay.
Okay, so
That was
that's,
so last month. I'm sorry.
okay, no problem.
Okay, so
Time is relative.
these significant areas within our system, those are the ones we are looking at and look at the bottlenecks.
Yep.
I'll tell you what, when you mentioned it, kind of went red alert for me is Wallace.
And this is only
That can totally skew our data.
in certain hours. So, and this is, 3 to 7 in the afternoon. So it's also a longer peak period than we account for in our modeling because we only do. People think it's 2 hours. And then the hours in the morning, whatever I said.
You said that was 6 to 10.
6 to 10, thank you.
Yeah.
So those are the federal, since this is a federal measure, they're encompassing all MPOs within the US. And so since it started at the bigger ones, that's why we have 4-hour peak hours as opposed to, thank you, Kim.
Thank you. There we go.
And it's,
Sadie, go ahead.
thanks. And it's a per capita measure. So we just look at the overall hours of delay on those things that are in the NHS, like our highways, our major arterials. And then we divide it by the number of people that live
In the
within
MPO.
that service area, within our MPO.
Within the
or-
MPO, and it's only excessive delay. So the feds allow a certain amount of delay, and I think I go into
page 3.
top of page 3, it talks about what that means. So where's page 3?
Being able, yeah, so the threshold is either 20 miles per hour or 60% of the posted speed limit, whichever is greater.
Right, and so I gave you
Oh.
examples of what that would mean, so you can get an idea. You know, it's not often that I-5 will go down to 36 miles an hour unless there is a major incident. But it is more likely that ferry and trade will be under 20 miles an hour. Just because,
I kind of hope they're under 20 miles an hour.
well, it's a 30 mile, so it's like, yeah. So depending on each road, the limit, the threshold is met at different speeds.
Huh,
And just to be clear, we don't measure this. This is a system that's provided nationally to all the
Right.
states and MPOs, and we just are showing you the data that they have collected. Yeah.
mhm.
So the question for, Steve, did that answer your question?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I just forgot to put my hand down.
No, that's okay. I just wanted to double check.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thanks. This map is extremely helpful. So the question we're being asked is to look at and can you go ahead, go back to the slide with the trends so we can see where our decision point is.
Sorry, I bumped you out.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh.
I know we're not sharing.
Well, you know what? We all have to adjust in the sandbox. It's all okay.
Okay, so here's
Okay.
here are the numbers again.
There's not a terribly big difference. So it's interesting that 21 bounced back up to pretty close to 19. Where, of course, anybody who's been out in a vehicle can attest to, yeah, pretty much.
That's the other thing. I don't have a good feel of how much more traffic causes that number to go, will go up 0.1, will go up 0.2 hours. You know, there isn't a good feel for how this works. There's just, you know, not enough data to really understand.
And what it seems to be pointing to is that the ideal amount of delay would be 0. We would just have people going free flow traffic 100% of the time.
That would be the Fed's dream, yes.
But this has no bearing
For
on
for excessive delay. So,
Excessive delay.
so there would still be delay,
Right.
but there would not be excessive delay.
yeah,
You're sitting there idly in traffic and not being able to go anywhere or, completely jammed up.
Right. So even in 2020, when, you know, you had multiple months of reduced
sitting at home.
travel,
There's that too.
stay at home. Yeah, I mean, the graph on page 4 of the memo sort of shows, you know, even in April, there was still some delay, excessive delay.
Yeah.
Recorded.
And this is, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is annual. So this is, you know, Ray driving, well, he lived here, Ray driving around, and he'd have 4 hours of excessive delay in a year on these roadway systems. So
That
depending on
seems so
perspective,
minimal. Wow.
Yeah, and for points of comparison, I think Eugene was, I mean, their data is like 5.5 hours or 6-ish for all this. I don't know what their target is. Metro was in the 15s when they were setting, they have data. So just to give you a little bit of idea of where this is. And then, you know, if you went to LA or Seattle, it would be 20 or more. I don't have those numbers off the top of my head.
So would potentially a catastrophic weather event like our ice storm that made traffic move very slowly over a series of several days potentially impact our annual delay?
Probably not, because you'd have a dip, but, and you might be, because we did have catastrophic, we did have big snowstorms in 21 or 19.
We had, I think the ice storm was 21 and you see,
That was
Yeah.
February 21, yeah.
And looking at the chart, I mean, it doesn't seem to go down a whole lot.
Yeah, it was major sarcasm right there.
So I would say that, you know, blips, those blips will cause a particular month, it might go down a little bit, but since we're looking over 12 months, it probably isn't going to impact the number substantially.
So to kind of get to a decision point here with looking at the trends versus aspirational, that we are able to work toward reducing the excessive delays, because it ties up everything, including transit, freight, all modes, carpools. So, just to kind of throw an idea out there, like Ray said, to split the difference with a baseline of 7 and then see how things shake out again in 2 years. Are we moving that direction? No pun intended. Are we way off on our assumptions? There's just a lot of unknowns that we don't have at this time. So what I would suggest as a starter for a motion would be to set our system performance at the baseline of 7 and then see how we go in the next couple of years.
So that would be for 2024 and 2026, set them both at 7. Instead of the 7.2 and 7.4.
Yeah,
I like that.
okay. Motion to that effect?
To that effect. How do you say it? I move that the committee approve assistance performance target for our annual peak hour excessive delay per capita at a target of 7 hours per year.
Second,
Moved and seconded. Okay, so moved by Sadie, seconded by Trevor. Maria, you had a question.
Yeah, I was just wondering like how this would influence, I guess, like the projects that would be hoping for, because like if we're wanting to keep it at 7, like presumably like there are certain projects that we'll want to get, I don't know, bumped up so we can meet that target.
Well, but the previous question, because they're already in the pipeline, and so I would have to defer to Karen to tell you how many of them are actually on the NHS that would actually address this. So, transit funding would be the big one. His project, right? I mean, there's still operational things that we support in our TIP. Plus the locals have operational improvements that would help with signals. Just learning, I think Salem is implementing some, new traffic controllers and things like that. So there are projects coming online. And these two are tied. So, I would see, if this goes down, the other one should go up and vice versa.
So for example, one of the projects Kaiser has is our Wheatland corridor. Once that is done, it actually clears traffic off of River Road because it allows people to get into the neighborhood, especially that very important corridor for transit, freight, vehicle, bike, ped. So once that is done, that'll reduce the congestion at certain points along River Road. So once you are able to allow people to get off and essentially clear the deck, that will reduce the excessive delays at particular pinch points. That's a great question.
Yeah, I was just wondering like how it would impact. So if like, we're not meeting these targets and say like you're having some sort of delays, knock on wood that won't happen. On like the Wheatland Road corridor, we could be like, Kaiser, like what's going on? Because we should beat this, like just gonna push you more.
Or if you give me the money, I'll build it.
And ODOT, if ODOT, when it widens I-5, so
Yes.
Googler, that'll presumably reduce delay on I-5, this number. I did find that.
Right, and then, some of the other areas around schools, if you're able to, like we did a right turn lane off of Lock Haven, which is another one. Once we did that and let people get to the Gubser neighborhood and the Gubser Elementary, that reduced that pinch point and reduced, again, delay for folks also. So, yeah, that's a great question. And our interoperability really depends on being able to diffuse. Yes. Yeah, great question. Any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed signify by saying no. Hearing no objection, motion passes unanimously. Let's go to the third one.
So second, that's only one. We're now on,
One, two.
yeah, but they were A and B. So you kind of like.
Whatever.
So we'll skip this one we can.
You too.
So we have the other performance measures, roadway safety, infrastructure, roadway system performance, the other ones that we haven't talked about, plus transit state of good repair and transit safety. So the TAC and the staff recommend that the policy committee support the ODOT and transit targets that have been set by those agencies for their performance measures. And that's what we did. That's what you guys, or that's what the policy committee did last time. I will mention that in your memo, I didn't have these roadway safety targets because they needed to confirm with what they were doing. So their targets are shown here. So essentially, they're the same targets for 2023 as baseline. So if you recall, and there's multiple reasons for this, you'll recall that I said that ODOT actually has some penalties if they don't make the targets, and roadway safety and bridge and pavement are the three that they have. If they make a target and they don't make it, they have to do stuff. So obviously, they have the right to report. And I will say, if you read the performance report, you'll see that they've never made their targets for safety, and which is unfortunate. But so they have to spend more money on safety, which they do. The other items to remember are: this is the target for next year, a 5-year rolling average. 2, this is statewide. So ODOT only 50. They were saying 50% of the fatalities and crashes are on non-ODOT facilities, so they don't have a whole lot of control what goes on there. 3, they also were looking at data for early 2021 or 2021 and 2022, and it's if you saw the report out last week, I believe that first part of this year was particularly bad nationwide, like bad in a long time. And they also have their S curve to trend towards a target of 0 in 2035. That's their ultimate goal in this period, but feds are having everyone do this year by year by year. And so they're just saying, so their targets for the next year, things will stay where they are, and then hopefully will diminish over time towards the 2035 Vision 0. And that's why the target that ODOT is submitting is essentially the same as the baseline. And I can go through all the other ones if you like. They are in Appendix P on pages P5 through P6. But for the transit state of good repair, which unfortunately did not get attached, but I can show you it as well, but you won't be able to read it.
We're so right.
Yeah, sorry. So are there any, I mean, I'll stop here and with the recommendation. I don't know if you want to go through all the other ones or in the
Let's break this into 2.
which ones you would like to discuss?
So let's break this into 2, and I'll get to you, Sadie. Let's look at the ODOT ones first, and because we've got Dan, we can ask questions, and then we'll talk about the transit ones. Okay,
Okay.
let's separate that out. So are there questions on any of the specifics within the ones where ODOT has been setting the target? And
think-
Sadie, have your hand up.
Yeah, my question might be a little more general than that. So when we are electing as a group to support these safety measures, either ODOT's or the mass transit district, in supporting that, does that become our safety recommendation, or are there additional ways that this committee could consider safety in projects?
So this is the reportable to USDOT.
Mhm.
As far as SKATS goes, when we are looking at projects, we can absolutely say, we love this project because we know it's going to improve safety. You know, when we're looking at some of our corridor projects, what we've done over on Auburn, 45th, a lot of our corridor projects, we know improve safety. So can we have that conversation here as we're looking at projects? Absolutely. So I think that is, and that's a conversation we have all the time at MWAC. Same thing. This is going to improve safety. We know that it's a dangerous intersection. We know that it's difficult to get across. And so the act and here at the MPO, we have prioritized projects. I'm thinking particularly, I remember the conversation around Brown Road. When those projects came up, it was so clear this was going to be a full system improvement for safety, accessibility to schools, bike, and just safety in general on that corridor. So if we could have that conversation, and that project got fully funded and built out. So this is a little bit different in what we report to DOT as I understand it.
Great. So essentially, all we're doing, if we support the target set by transit or ODOT, all we're saying is what's on the screen. We will do what we have been doing, which is planning, agreeing to plan and program projects that contribute towards accomplishing their goals.
Mhm.
And so we already do that, as Chair Clark mentioned. You know, we provide funding for projects to address safety issues, and we provide funding towards transit to make their service more attractive for use,
Efficient,
buses more efficient, et cetera. So we're already, our baseline is we're already doing this. We're just letting ODOT and transit set the targets as they own and operate the facilities and have a better idea of what's going on specifically for theirs. And also, the nice thing is, while we can, we're supporting the statewide targets, we also get from ODOT, at least, you know, specific numbers for the SKATS area. So we can also support the ODOT targets, but look and see what's going on within SKATS for each of these. If you, as part of the process, you know, we can have that discussion as well.
Yeah,
So
I'll
I-
let you wait. Oh, go ahead, say.
Yeah, I
you have a
just-
follow-up?
Well, I don't think that my question got totally answered. Just so that I'm clear on the conversation that we're having. We can support the targets by ODOT and the Mass Transit District, but we as a policy committee will perhaps have the opportunity to consider and use additional safety criteria in our selection criteria conversation.
We always
Or
do.
not, or this
We
is
always
kind
do.
of tying us to the measures and metrics that ODOT is using, even though there's no, we talked about the flaws in their reporting tool at our last meeting. So I'm just trying to understand what we are supporting here and how that binds us to our project selection criteria and process.
So I'm gonna flip it around, but I'm gonna go to, I see Karen has her hand up and Mike. So I'll look, Karen and Mike, and then Steve, I do see your hand up. If you could let Karen and Mike answer the question, then I'll come to you. For Steve Horning. Okay. Mike, Karen.
Karen, go ahead. You go
Well,
first.
mine wasn't exactly the answer to this question, though, of course, when we selected projects for the TIP, remember how we did the criteria and we weighted safety projects? So we had a choice of doing that. That is something that doesn't have anything to do with the performance measure. It's more the priorities that you as the policy committee have made, is that safety is important. And therefore we can use different, we don't need to use these. This doesn't tie us, I guess. It doesn't tie us into not using our own selection criteria to select projects. But what I wanted to say is the TIP in itself we have to demonstrate that we are helping to contribute towards these performance measures. So there's always a chapter in the tip that talks about how the projects that we select help ODOT meet their targets. And so I will go through for safety projects, we'll say we're spending X amount of dollars towards projects that will improve safety. And that is demonstrating that we are planning and programming projects. And so that is how, we are doing the actual performance measures and how we're relating to that.
Now I'm gonna go to Mike.
Yeah, as I listened to the question from you, Sadie, it's a little bit of apples and oranges in my mind because these targets are regional scale. They're numbers for the whole region, right? And all we're doing is saying, do we want to support ODOT's statewide targets and program projects that help the entire state, including our area, reduce these fatality rates or number of fatalities. And that's a good thing. We all want to reduce fatalities. The second part, the apples and orange part, is you're asking, how can we use numbers to select projects? That's a kind of a different conversation. And later in the agenda, we're talking about the criteria we're using to pick projects for the plan. Karen's talking about picking projects for the TIP. It's a process too. Picking projects for the plan. We want to put more emphasis on safety as those are higher priority projects. So we can do
So
these.
that's actually, you're nailing exactly my question. So
Okay.
my question is, by agreeing to these, to these target outcomes for safety, are we agreeing to what we mean by safety at this point in this decision? So if we say, yeah, we support you, ODOT, this is what safety should look like, 100%, let's get those fatality numbers down. Are we then bound to an agreement about safety being defined by ODOT in a way that informs our selection criteria?
I would say the short answer is no. They're really
Okay.
separate. Even though they're both about safety, one doesn't necessarily impact the other. So we could support ODOT's targets, but then go much further locally and say, we want to put a lot of weight in picking projects, having safety a critical criteria.
Wonderful.
So-
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that we as a group were clear on that and we didn't then refer back to this as our safety metric.
Not solely, of course. Trevor, or I'm sorry, Steve Horning, I go to you.
Well, to me, it seems we're beating a dead horse here because we're following these processes. We're supporting ODOT's guidelines. It covers all of our bases. And so we're spinning our wheels over stuff that we shouldn't need to. So can I just make a motion to recommend to support ODOT and SAMD TD targets for these performance measures?
You just did.
And I'll second it.
Seconded by Danielle. Any further discussion? This is just the ODOT one. You did not mention in your motion about the, oh, okay, I didn't hear that slipped in. SA, okay, so this is for the, both the ODOT and the SAMTD, which is Salem Area Mass Transit District. Sure. Okay. Further discussion. Maria.
Definitely very supportive and moving forward with this. I'm just wondering how come it never here it never meets baseline on the safety, what we have reported here on goodness, I just lost the little table where it just always says did ODOT meet it? No. Did it meet the baseline? No.
No, yes.
Why?
My aspiration.
Did they meet,
They can't meet.
did they meet or make significant progress?
Yeah.
Yes, that is one of the, so that's why ODOT has been required by the feds to devote all the, whatever additional funds for safety and right how they're going to meet the targets. Also, historically, they set 4 years worth of targets at one go, as opposed to doing it yearly. So they were sort of locked into where they were going. Not that it probably would have made a difference because everything has changed 2020 or even before that, so. The states that did meet their targets tend to meet targets that were increasing. So I don't think anybody really wants to see that happen. So you have that sort of, you have a lot of things happening and we don't have control of everything that's happening, goes into it.
Also, I want to point out something that my public works director, former one, pointed out to me a long, long time ago. He said a lot of the federal regulations are written for and designed to get at the East Coast states, because that's where they are, that's where they live. So a lot of it doesn't translate west very well. And I was discussing something relative to transportation with him at that time, and he goes, there's a reason that some of the things that we get don't necessarily make sense, or increasing numbers of fatalities is somehow meeting a target. And that would never cross the mind of anybody sitting in this room. But somewhere, somebody thought that was an okay target. And I know none of us would agree to that, but it said a lot of the federal stuff is not written with us in mind.
Yeah, well, but I mean, like, these are the same, like,
Yeah.
baselines that ODOT themselves are like setting, right? So I was just wondering, because, I mean, it's, baseline for 2012-2016 was 390.2, and the actual for 2014, 2018 target was 350, and then the actual was 449. So, like, I understand that it's a really big system, but just kind of concerned. Yeah, that it's like never met.
Well, one of the big areas, I believe, 82nd, is that on the ODOT system?
Was.
Yeah, and that has significant impact on the number of fatalities. And, you know, it's nothing we can control here. And actually, there were a lot of things the ODOT couldn't control that was contributing to extraordinary number of crashes and fatalities. And to that point, there were things that were beyond control, but within our area, we can look at our projects and our targets and support ODOT, saying, hey, we got our fatalities down. Good for the people, and it's also going to help their numbers. So thank you, that's a great question. Any further discussion? Oh, right.
Mike doesn't like people setting targets or agreeing to targets that haven't been set yet. So we'll come back for the transit safety one when they actually set them later this year. Yeah, it's missing. We would hope we would have them, but they're working on their public transportation safety action plan, and we'll have new targets later this summer, fall.
So friendly
I'll
amendment.
hold you accountable for that. Vicky, not Steve Horning.
So we take that out of the motion, I'm hearing.
Yeah.
So friendly amendment to remove Salem area mass transit from the motion.
Wait just a second.
Okay,
Get a good repair hand.
let's call for the vote here. We're spinning
Hang
our
on.
wheels still.
We've got to take these, but possibly take these out. Which ones have to come out?
Safety, transit safety, we don't have the numbers yet, so.
Okay, so all the transit safety ones need to come out of the motion.
No, not all the.
Okay, which ones? Specify.
Just the transit safety, so the one that transit,
Well, I see all these safety transit. I see a whole list of them here. So help me out.
the fixed route, so on page P15, there's the fatalities, injuries, safety. That's what- I think we're talking the same thing when you say.
I'm seeing this whole list here.
Yep, that's it. We're good.
Take all of them out.
Yeah, anything that says public transit.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So anything that says, Salem area mass transit, they're not ready to go yet. Is that correct?
You're missing your memo
Oh.
That's what I'm looking at.
in summary.
Just the safety ones. Okay, so state of good repair, stay in, the safety ones come out. Is that correct? Motion amended to reflect removing the safety dash transit items. Steve, you good with that? Steve Horning, you are the mover.
Yes, I'm good with that.
Okay, Danielle, good?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed signify by saying no. Hearing no objection, thank you all. Motion passes unanimously.
And just to foreshadow, the yearly ones will be coming back to.
Good.
Safety and transit. All transit and the road safety.
Fantastic. What I would like to do, because we do have a time constraint for a couple of folks, is ask if we can take item G on order, that there is an action item on that, and then circle back to F. Would that be all right with everybody? Any objection to taking item G out of order? Okay, yeah, can we skip to G and then we'll circle back to F?
Ray's has a PowerPoint for that.
Okay,
So we've talked about this item multiple times this year about the criteria and weights we're using to look at our long-range plan and the projects, proposed projects for the long-range plan. And how do we evaluate them? How do we select which ones are included in the plan, in the 20-year plan, and which ones may be excluded from that 20-year plan? They put illustrative plans. So, bring up my notes here. This criteria is, I'll just say next. So, so this criteria is based on the goals and objectives that are set in the plan. We as a policy, you as a policy group have reviewed the goals and some of the objectives in the past. So this is an extension of those goals and objectives. And what we're doing is we're taking those goals and objectives and saying, okay, now we have projects. How do we evaluate projects to those goals and objectives? You have evaluation criteria, which we talked about quite a bit. So it's a way of selecting projects for our long-range plan. Now because it's a federal plan, we can't just throw every project in our plan and say it's good. They want a financially constrained plan. They want to say, what can you afford over the planning horizon, which in our case is like 23 years, it's 2050, so it's 27 years. So we do, so as part of the process, Ray is working on revenue forecasts coming from the state, how much the MPO will get, how much the locals will get. So there's a revenue side, and then there's the expense side, the list of projects, what their expected cost is. So there'll be has to be a balance eventually. What can you afford in those 20 years? And this evaluation criteria helps inform the whole process. You know, which projects are you going to pick? Let's say your total projects cost $500 million, but your revenue is $400 million. So which of those projects do you want to put in the financially constrained, and everything else goes into an illustrative list? And that's what I'm trying to say in this slide, is we have to separate the projects, ones that go in the financially constrained, the one that go in the illustrative. We're going to use the evaluation criteria to make those choices. Won't be the only way to make a choice, but it'll be important. Next slide. So, you know, we do this plan every 4 years. We've shown you these criteria before. This is a list of criteria that we used last time, and we're not recommending any changes to this list. They worked well for us in the past. So these ones about looking how the project increases the miles of travel lanes, rank good, bridges, does it help transit operations, reduce a gap in the regional system, does it help freight movement, does it increase access to employment or jobs, does it address a known safety location or issue, does it address a bottleneck? All those ones will be used to evaluate a project. They'll give a score of 0 and 1 we're using for most of them. Yeah. So you look at a project and say, okay, it gets a score of 1 for these 4 evaluation criteria and a score of 0 for these other. How come the process works. Next slide. For this cycle of the plan, we want to make some small changes. So this is the list of changes we want to make. We've talked about them in past meetings, but we've stumbled over this discussion a bit, so we're bringing it back to you. So I think those are the list. I'll just go through them one by one. Next. So the safety criteria, as I said just a minute ago, for every criteria, you will either have a score of 0 or a score of 1. Either it meets the criteria or it doesn't. But for safety, because there's a lot of emphasis and a lot of choice by the policy committee to do more for safety, and also to look at safety for vulnerable users, we thought we'd switch to a scale that's 0, 1, and 2. So a project gets a score of 2 if it provides facilities for safer travel by vulnerable users, people walking and biking. Next slide. For the environmental justice criteria, you may remember we had a long discussion about this. The past wording for the criteria does not produce a disproportionate burden on an EJ population. That's actually something kind of hard to measure. Whether an individual project, especially these small projects, have much burden or not. Most of them don't, otherwise we wouldn't have be proposing them that they do something. And also on the EJ population exists all over the MPO area. So how do we know who it's really affecting? So instead of that definition, we are proposing to change it to likely to improve transportation facilities within an EJ area. And we know those areas that have a higher proportion of the population that are environmental justice, low income and minority populations. So we can look at a project and say, is this a project that is going to improve facilities within an EJ area? If it does, it gets 1, if not, it gets a score.
And if I could jump in here, one of the reasons that we talked in the past about why this wording was so important was that this reflects what we've done in the past in selecting projects.
So the switch of the wording focuses on the benefits of the project as opposed to the burdens, and we didn't think a lot of our projects had burdens. And in addition, it's to looking at areas with a higher percentage of EJ population, which ties in with the federal government's Justice 40 initiative, which is part of the agenda item we just skipped on planning item F. But that if you read any of that the Justice 40 initiative is a big initiative by the federal agencies. Next slide. We talked about this in past meetings, the environmental criteria to cultural, environmental, and historic resources. When we actually looked at how projects are affecting them, we're finding that it wasn't a good way to separate projects. Almost all the projects had very little impact to a cultural, environmental, or historic resource. So we just figured it's not helping us make any decisions. So just drop that criteria. Next one. And then we've had an environmental goal. Last time we updated the plan, we added wording to the explanatory statement saying it would help reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And I'm not going to repeat everything the state's going on. You all know what's going on at the state level, local level. So this is a choice if we want to add this criteria. Now, the reasons for adding it include the federal government has proposed earlier this year that they have a specific performance measure for reducing tailpipe emissions of CO2, which is a greenhouse gas. So we don't know that that's going to be adopted or not, but the indication is the federal government, the current administration, wants to have that as a performance measure. Then there's some other executive orders the current administration is promoting for public health and climate crisis. And of course, at the state level, there's a lot of legislation to reduce greenhouse gas. So this is the proposed wording, is likely to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. We don't know how much it will for every project. That's a very difficult thing to estimate, but on a kind of limited basis, does a project reduce or not reduce greenhouse gases? And we're going to take our best guess on that. If it's promoting biking and walking or transit, it would reduce greenhouse gases. Next one. So in addition to the criteria, you can weight certain criteria, put more importance on the criteria. So the table 1 in the memo has those weights, but it's also shown here. So we did this last time. We gave more weight to the safety criteria. We gave more weight to the bottleneck criteria that removes the bottleneck. We gave extra weight for enhancing transit or reducing a gap in the regional system. So putting something like bike lanes or sidewalks in a gap on the system. All the other criteria get a weight of 1. So this is a choice, a policy choice, if you want to weight certain criteria to have more influence in selecting or ordering a list of projects. Next. This is kind of a general statement. We've had this discussion at multiple policy committee meetings in order to kind of get you comfortable with these criteria, what they mean, how they're potentially weighted or not. And we had a workshop August 2nd, which you were all invited to pick Ray's brain more about these criteria. And we do need to finalize the criteria to continue work on the MTP. So we have all these projects that Ray's working with local governments on what they are, what their cost is. He's working on the revenue side. But now it's coming to the point of the fulcrum's kind of meeting here. We need to go through a process of picking the projects in our plan. And like I said, not all of them that will go on the plan will be in the 20-year plan. Ones that don't make it in the 20-year plan will be still in an illustrative list. So they won't be lost forever. We still know what they are. They just may not be in the 20-year plan. Next slide. So wrapping up, the options in front of you are to look at the table 1, which has the I don't have my number. Here it is. Oh, I got it. Look at table 1, which has the criteria. The definitions are in the provided previously, and the weights. Do that. You can modify things in table 1. You can say, you know, no, I want to keep this one, or I don't like the weights used that you're using. And then finally, the safety criteria, which we have a different scale, 0, 1, and 2. This is before we weighted. But the different scale, do you want to go with that or just keep it a 0, 1 kind of scoring? So I'll stop here if this and see if there's any questions, and then it's open for you to discuss and give us direction what you want criteria.
Okay, general questions before we go to the options 1, 2, and 3. Maria, and then I think Sadie, you unmuted.
Not so much a question, just as a really appreciate all the time that y'all have put into it. I really like the idea of having that safety with the 0, 1, and 2 to just kind of highlight the really vulnerable users. And then I think I like the current EJ wording of like likely to improve facilities in an EJ area. I really like that kind of like positive forward thinking. And I was just thinking that the likely to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, like, I don't know, maybe like a weight of 1 or 2, because I don't see any 2s. But yeah, pretty much all I had.
All right, thank you very much. Sadie? Did you have
Thank
something?
you, Chair Clark. Yeah, I would completely echo the support for the tiered safety measure. I'm not sure how 0, 1, and 2 lines up with 4 in the weighting, but that's probably my ignorance on weighting. And I can just like, if I like the mechanics that go into it, then I can just wait until we get to the process to have Karen be like, this is how the numbers magically work on weighting. And I'm fine with that unless it is important for me to understand. And I'll just look for Karen to give me like an up or down.
Well, Karen's not doing it. It's
Oh, Karen's not doing it. You're off the hook, Karen.
I'm gonna have Mike explain this one.
Okay. It's a simple multiplication. So if you have a safety project and let's say it gets a score of 2 because it helps vulnerable populations. Then if you weight it with a 4, that means that 2 is multiplied by 4. It has an 8 toward the final score. It gets 0s and 1s for the other criteria, depending on how it's weighted. So projects will have a score anywhere from 0 to whatever the maximum might be, like in the 20s or something like that. But you get the weight idea of the weighting for the safety. So it'd be, we got a score of 2 and it's multiplied by 4, then you get 8 for safety. That's final score. Same with
Describe a spreadsheet.
yeah, and it's all in a spreadsheet, and same with what's it reduces a gap. If it's weighted 3, a project that gets a score of 1 initially is multiplied by 3, so it's got 3 points towards its final score.
Does that help? I'm
That
gonna
clears it up entirely. Yeah, it was 0, 1, and 2, and then 4. And I just want to make sure I was guessing correctly the way that it worked. And I think I did. So thank you.
Okay, let's work through these options then. Number 1 is, oh, I'm sorry, did I miss somebody? Danielle, did you have your hand? No, I think that's the cursor actually. It's sitting right on top of Danielle's picture. There we go. Well, do you have something?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I just want to voice some of my concerns on some of these. when we're looking at, guys, because our MPO takes a look at in city and also on the rural edges of town. Some of this is really gonna weigh different from downtown Salem or Wallace Road versus Corden Road or Wallace Road. Highway 22 going out of town, because you don't have the population or the rural population in numbers like you do in the core areas. That's gonna skew some of the scoring towards gonna be maybe more of a challenge to get some of the more rural, very important infrastructure to reduce the waiting in downtown because we can get around instead of cutting through.
Remember that you make the final decision. So this is just giving you an overall idea of where things rank out. And if you have a project in Polk County that is very important, it will get funded or it will be included in the list.
Okay, so on the scoring numbers,
Yeah.
Polk County, Marion County, both, is we have outskirts on both sides.
Yeah.
So I'd be really curious, what was the tax recommendation on this?
They were okay with the criteria. We haven't talked about weights. And we haven't, did we talk about the safety last time?
I missed some of the meeting because I was in.
Wait.
Grand Rapids, so.
Should we talk about the safety?
Didn't do it here.
We haven't talked about the safety. Okay, that's, so the criteria in general that we've talked about, where the list that's on table 1. We haven't talked about the weighting or putting extra emphasis on the vulnerable users, which is a more of a policy decision than a tax decision.
And then I'm all for safety. Safety is important no matter what mode of transportation, walking or bicycle. I think that is a balanced, something we need to look at completely. So if we're gonna add pedestrian or bicycle, then I would say a 0 or a 1. Because again, that's adding a lot of scoring points. If we're scoring things, we're gonna do them in the order they score out. That's very concerning.
Okay. Maria,
I was just wondering, like, not to like kind of like belabor everything that we've been going through, but like similar to how we have like the project is likely to improve facilities in an EJ area, could we do like improve facilities in an EJ area, like EJ or rural area? Is that like a definition that we have?
It would no longer be an EJ criteria. You just said rural. I mean, unless that EJ area, that low income area happens to be rural. I don't know.
I was just trying to think of a way to also uplift. the life.
Right. We also, there aren't a lot of projects in the rural area. I mean, the
in the MPO.
Yeah.
The MPO, so, you know, Brook Lake is rural-ish. And South River Road and 2251,
Big one.
that's the big one in Polk County. So
Corden Road. So is
it's, Corden Road's right on, it's on the urban boundary.
that, exactly, but it
So-
doesn't have the numbers or the bicycle pedestrian traffic that we would have in a downtown.
Right, but the projects are including bicycle and pedestrian facilities.
Okay,
So they're already, because they're, the long range plan is for a multi-use path on the west side, representing that the east side is more, well, it is rural or
It's across
farm
the board.
related and stuff. Sorry,
Isn't that across the border too?
and it is across the border, as we like to say, yes. And as I kind of skipped over quickly, value creation is just one way you. So, well, if we go through this process of scoring, Marion County will get a list of how their projects scored. Polk County will get a list of how their projects scored. I'm sure there's many projects in Polk counties. Not specifically Polk County.
But city sales.
Kaiser will get their list, Salem will get their list, you know, in order by their score. And then we'll look at the revenue that Marion County is bringing in. And there'll be kind of a cut line or it's not exactly a cut line, but there's a gray line. They could definitely afford the ones toward the top of the list. But as you get toward the middle and the bottom, the revenue is not there.
So it's a way to kind of say, well, here's, we can maybe shift the order. This is a really important project in Marion County. It's maybe our number one, even though it didn't score the highest. We want to see it in part of the included list. So we've allowed that in the past to say, because our policy committee said they wanted that. We want to be able to move things around if we feel there's a good reason to it beyond the scoring.
Because the criteria, the other criteria, the political, the intangibles that we can't do ones and zeros to. That's
Exactly.
That's what
Exactly.
Well, I'm thinking of like an urban renewal district like McGilchrist. That's a very significant project for Salem connectivity. Every single mode along that area is impacted. It may not score as well, but because that's been a priority project that has additional benefits to Salem, they may, Salem could say, and I'm looking at Trevor who has a hand up, that might be something that Salem says, this is really important, and here's additionally why, and that's when we can have those conversations among the, we represent, the citizenry across our area. Trevor, you've been very patient. Thank you. I'll go to you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Chair. My hand wasn't up for very long. I just want to make sure, like, I understand this. I think I really appreciate staff's suggestions. I don't see these as like, a huge departure from what we were doing, but I see these as significant, improvements, especially when it comes to safety. I mean, I understand that, change can be, like it might disrupt things a little bit, but the way I would look at this more is just, whenever you have like a pedestrian versus someone in a vehicle type collision, once you're at like 30 miles an hour or faster, the odds of surviving that, or just surviving, let alone severe morbidity, they're so much higher. It's exponential. So I think it isn't so much just the at risk in terms of like a policy stance on pedestrian and bicycles. It's really just re-emphasizing safety itself. I mean, some of the worst injuries I've seen as an emergency room doctor are that pedestrian at 30 to 40 miles an hour, versus a vehicle. So I would really like us to adopt the safety scoring of 1 and 2, not just a 0 and a 1. I think it'll really, be beneficial in terms of decreasing injuries and fatalities across the system. And I know in Ward 3, or at the edge of Ward 3, one of the things I'd like to see on my dream list is the improvement or Cordon Road as it goes across Highway 22. And I see this as it benefits all of those things. Like if you get that overpass, fixed and updated, you're helping bicycles, you're helping pedestrians, you're helping cars, you're helping throughput, you're helping bottlenecks. And I would imagine many of our high priority projects will score actually pretty highly with this nominal, staff recommendation based on input from many of us on this body. So especially on the safety one, I like the future state that's recommended with 0, 1, and 2. I hope I did a good job of explaining myself. And then the staff, am I wrong? Like, am I misreading this? Did I summarize it in a way that's okay?
You summarized it perfectly. And just to add one more thing. So this is a process that makes a lot of sense. People can follow it. It's reflective of the goals and what priorities you put on your goals, but it also gives a measure of flexibility. So after all the scoring, if there's a project in Marion County, like let's say that bridge project over Battle Creek, which may not have scored tremendously when we looked at it, but that other factors may have brought it up to a higher priority. If that scored low, but you say, God, we know how important that is. We want it in the final plan. That's your prerogative. So,
Like we said, the intent.
so there is a process. We can show the federal agency saying we have a process that shows how we're meeting, trying to improve our targets and stuff like that, and our goals, but also this flexibility for control.
Okay, I'm gonna go to Steve Horning real quick. I'll get back to you, and then we need these motions on the table and conclude business, and then get back to.
Yeah, I was actually jumping on the Battle Creek Bridge scenario because I'm thinking about anything that would happen in Marion County's roads out in the Turner area. And if we change to something like this, does that change the opportunity or the score with the scoring the way it's set? would the opportunity go down or be a lower opportunity for a project being selected? Because right now, it's does sound like that our current system, every one of the projects, we evaluate everything on the list. I mean, if we have a project on an intersection, we're going to sit here and talk about the safety, the traffic on any one of our particular projects. So, I mean, Trevor made the comment that they're pretty close in this particular case, but if we have the capability on any project to still make those decisions, why change it? And I feel that the smaller communities, and I'm, biased about Turner, and I totally understand that, the intersection of Lancaster and Market is going to be a little different than 3rd and Delaney and Turner. But at the same time, are we going to kick ourselves out and just not even have the opportunity?
That has been an ongoing issue with the urban rural, absolutely, and the safety projects in Turner have always been important, and is getting the funding for those because the formulas have been so difficult to
Is
get
it
those
true
funded.
that we get to decide on each project, though?
Mhm.
I mean,
Yeah,
whatever the
ultimately, we
project
are
is-
you have the policy group. This is a tool. This is a tool for us to use in understanding our projects, but it is not the only tool.
Does the scoring we give it go to ODOT or? No,
Our tool.
This is internal to our process. All that anyone else sees is here's the list of projects that we think will be funded in the next 20 years. And I mean, we document the process in Appendix C, so it is documented.
Right.
But we don't, the choice of how the projects end up in the final list is yours.
So what's made SKATS work over the years, and one of the best assets to them is Mike Brooks. We all represent our own entities. We're here individually, our individual areas. And we all give and take, and everybody that lives in those areas knows what the safety corridors are, the most dangerous place in our neighborhood or our local highways. And that versatility, being able to work as a team, that's what makes us work the best. And that's where was my biggest concern on this, is as long as I know that we can get a project done in Turner or Corden Road or down in West Salem, that works. But I just don't never lose that.
Danielle?
Yeah, thanks, Kathy. I'm supposed to be running another meeting right now. So either I want to ask to postpone this because we can't get to a point of consensus, or I want someone to make a motion so we can move ahead. Because we have talked about this now 6 months.
Make the motion.
Well, I don't want to change anything. So I make the motion to keep the criteria the same, and then we can score individually as we go forward.
So,
I'll second that.
okay, so table, are you talking about table 1? Okay, as it's been presented. Is that correct?
Table
No.
one actually has our changes.
Yeah, it's changed.
Okay.
Table 1 without the changes.
Table 1 without the changes.
Correct.
I want to remove that.
I'll second that.
And who was the second? I'm sorry. Oh,
Steve.
Steve, okay. So it's moved and seconded to adopt table 1 as presented. May I make a friendly amendment to go ahead and remove the culturally, the CEH resource, since it is it doesn't make a difference. We all do it.
Yes, I accept that.
Okay. And may I make a friendly amendment to likely to improve facilities in the EJ area, keep the revised language?
Yes.
Steve, do you accept? Okay, that's been accepted. Any other changes? Sadie?
No changes. I was waiting for us to get to a point of discussion.
We're on discussion.
Okay. I think Counselor Phillips had his hand up first, but I'll just take an opportunity to say, I think that by not approving the staff proposed changes on improvements to the way that we score projects for safety, we're not only dismissing months of conversation, but we are not improving the tool as we move forward.
That's a separate, that's gonna be a separate motion, I believe. Did you want to?
It will be. I won't be able to support the motion proposed.
I'm a little confused. So I thought that was a separate action.
Current motion, let's be clear about where we are. So the
Right.
Well, yeah, so we have a motion and a second. I'm just saying, I feel the motion as proposed is dismissive of a lot of the work that we've done and work that staff has done, and I won't be able to support it.
Okay, thank you for that. Would you clarify on the safety 1, 2, because I understood that to be a separate action.
It could be a separate action. It's not part of the table.
It's not part of the table, so that's
So
a separate one.
That would have to be Daniel's prerogative. I know, but she.
Yeah, maybe I'm not clear on what's included.
Danielle,
I
does that
thought the
include-
proposal.
Did the intent of your motion include the safety criteria using scale of 0, 1, 2?
I'm happy to support that. I want safety to be the priority, and based on table 1, it is at a 4 of a score for criteria. If it gets us to a point to move forward to close this discussion, fine. I don't want this back and forth anymore. I don't support half of the things that we've been discussing for 6 months. Marion County supports safety, Polk County supports safety, Salem, Kaiser, Turner. Everybody has said that. So I feel like we're beating a dead horse to change the criteria. So if we need to get to a point of me making a motion to support the table 1 criteria with the modifications of breaking safety down into a 1, 2 category, fine, I'll do that.
So that's a friendly amendment then to add the additional level of safety criteria with the 0, 1, 2.
Based on multiplication, it gets us to the same number in the future, but yes, fine, we'll go with that.
Trevor, are you good with that? Not Trevor, I'm sorry, I see your hand up. Steve, are you good with that, that change?
Yes, I am.
Friendly amendment then amends the motion to include table 2, the safety proposed criterion scoring. Trevor. and then
Yeah, I
Mary,
think that this has cleared up my question. I wanted to understand like the original motion and now with this addition, I think I'm satisfied. I think I can support this. But I just want to verify with staff, what we're voting on now incorporates the safety as well as the friendly amendments that the chair made. So I think I know what I'm voting on and I think I support it. Am I missing anything?
We will we'll go, yeah, I see that from Sadie. We will repeat the motion. Maria,
Okay.
you had a comment and then we'll repeat the motion. And then,
And I appreciate the back and forth and this improvement. Thank you.
Maria,
I know that in the presentation you had mentioned about how potentially like the federal government was gonna have us require some greenhouse gas emission things, and it's just like unsure how we were gonna measure that.
It's a proposed rule. Proposed rules don't make them final.
Yeah.
So at some point in the future, there may be a rule where we have to have a performance measure, just like those other performance measures we talked about earlier.
And it's not for projects, you can't do what they're proposing at a project level.
It's a
Well,
regional. it's a
I was just gonna
regional-
ask if it would make it easier for staff to just like include it now, or if it would be something later.
We do not have to have one now. You know, even though the federal government has in the planning emphasis areas pushed to do more for climate, climate change. That's up to you whether you want to have a criteria on greenhouse gases or not. That's what I was going to raise my hand because we hadn't discussed that one particularly. Do we want to have the greenhouse gas criteria or not? I'd like to have a decision one way or another today.
well, and that's why I had mentioned it. I didn't mention it because this is not yet defined by the feds. This is not yet something that we'll be reporting to them at this point. And we already have other efforts underway, planning efforts, again, that are big question marks. We don't know what that looks like yet. And so we're already doing some of that planning work, but to be able to come back and say, okay, we better understand what this will actually do right now is just, good for the climate. Okay. I think we made that case for every single project personally.
Well, and then I mean, most of these would kind of work on that. So like, as I understand, the motion with the modifications is that we are like having the table with the current environmental justice criteria, removing the cultural, what was the wording?
Cultural, environmental, and historic.
That's CEH.
And then approving the 0, 1, 2 safety criteria.
Correct. That's as it stands right now. Cool. And then it's not adding the greenhouse gas one at this time because this is still a wheel in motion, both federally and state.
So we'll drop that
That
one.
is the motion on the table at this time. Any further discussion?
Just so I'm clear.
Yes.
On the EJ one.
Mhm.
Is the motion to revert it back to its previous one or the motion to use the new definition?
Use the friendly amendment was to use one in the table. Project is likely to improve facilities in an EJ area.
Thank you.
I'm getting head nods from the mover and the second. All in favor, please unmute and signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, please unmute and signify by saying no. Motion passes unanimously. Great work, everyone. Thank you so much. Thank you all for being willing to take this out of order. And I know that we skipped something in terms of a little bit of the topic information. We are going to go back now to item F, which is the ODOT, US DOT 2021 planning emphasis areas. Thank you, Mike. On this.
Yes, I'm going to be very brief given the length of the meeting so far. So every so many years, the USDOT comes up with planning emphasis areas. It's where the administration, based on the administration and what's in federal law, they says are areas that MPOs and states should emphasize their planning. So they came out with ones in December of 2021, and they asked SKATS to respond to, as best we could at the time, how we're addressing the planning emphasis areas. So I'm not going to go into detail about this. I was going to talk about the the newer ones have to do with tackling the climate crisis, which is a big emphasis nationally, of course. So federal highway, federal transit is addressing that. Equity and Justice 40 are big initiatives at the federal level. You'll be hearing more about that. So that's a planning emphasis areas. Big streets, public involvement, etc. So I included our response that we sent in, I think, April, about how we're addressing each one of these planning emphasis areas. And things may be different now based on, the vote, because we're not quite including a greenhouse gas environmental criteria in our selection of projects. But environmental justice, we still are emphasizing EJ areas in the long range plan. So just for the interest of time, I'll just stop there and see if there's any questions about both the planning emphasis areas or our response.
Questions on the emphasis areas?
This is an informational item, so.
Well, I mean, I found it fascinating to read too, and that really helped clear up a lot of questions that I had. Anybody else? Thank you very much for this work. Okay, let us then go to item H, just a summary of the OMPOC meeting, which I have my notes with me. I did have my notes with me. Well, go ahead, Mike. I can't find my notes.
You know what? Can we just skip that? I'm going to grab my notes. I think I left them in my office. I put the information in the blurb here, but can we switch? Okay, go to item I,
Yes,
Karen, and I'm going to grab my notes.
okay. I left them on my desk. Confound it. Let's see if I can remember. That was the last month. Okay, Karen, you're up.
Well, and I I was going to do this incredibly quickly because it really it's just the modifications that I've made since last month. You can see some of the approved resolutions that you approved last month. Those I made to the tip, so those are already done. The one that is probably the most interesting is the last one, which is combining the $211,500 into a new key number. This is for our the Oregon household survey, and we had taken the funds from the household survey that was $425,000 of that we had put into COVID relief money. If you remember the CRISA funds, we decided to use the CRISA funds to fund that project. Then we had $425,000 there. $211,500 is all we needed. So those funds have now been moved into a key number that has all of the statewide funds in it. And that's what this is. Next month, you'll actually see us adding the project that has that money in it, so we can see the money, how it goes. So at any rate, if there's any questions on that one, so then the rest of the money, the remaining 211,000, will actually just come back to the MPO. We won't be using that money.
Any questions on that process? And I really appreciate how Karen, you and the entire team worked to consolidate federal money, because defederalizing is always a good thing when we get a chance to do it.
So,
Simpler.
well, and it was coming up with the match. The match money was hard for that one. So this can be used for match money.
Nice.
Okay, thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Okay, circling back to OMPOC.
The two major presentations had to do with DLCD's climate-friendly and equitable communities rules. So we had staff from the department talking about those and next steps for especially the urban areas. We talked about the household activity survey and the process for that. So we'll be participating in that, as long as all the other MPOs and ODOT. We're in the process of developing it, but the actual survey will be in the spring 2023. We'll provide updates at future meetings about that. There was presentations about ODOT's interstate bridge replacement. Quite an interesting process they're going through 10 years after Columbia River crossing. And then ODOT, as far as their updates, they are updating both the long-range Oregon Transportation Plan, which covers all modes, and then they'll move on to the ODOT Highway Plan later on after that. They're getting toward the end of their process for the Transportation Plan. Then information about, the Transportation Planning Rule was updated, so they're working to help. They're going to develop a process to help local governments update their local TSPs to comply with those updates to the Transportation Planning Rule. And then we had a bunch of roundtables, everything from what Metro's doing and breaking ground for the Abernathy Bridge near Oregon City to what else of interest?
Highway 97.
Down in Albany, the Intermodal Center, they were talking about that. So they are getting closer to opening that facility, which I think will be an impact to our area, our 3-county area.
In a positive way.
Right? So hoping for an October opening for that intermodal facility. And he was saying the initial plan was to do exporting only, but now they're switching. They might be doing some importing too. So multiple ways of moving freight. That's pretty much it. Normal 2-hour meeting, but it's hard to summarize in a few words.
Yeah, big emphasis on, I encourage people to go to look at ODOT's website for the interstate bridge replacement. The new design, if it took some time for them to go back and rethink it, I don't know about y'all, but I love it. Especially better service for Hayden Island, undoes a lot of bottlenecks, really did a lot more comprehensive look at the layout for all modes in that region. So I think it's got a lot of pluses for it that the original one didn't. So to the planning team, good job, Dan.
Got a lot to do with it.
Yeah. So you can pass that on. It really did listen carefully and took a lot more of the into account.
This time last as well. So
Oh, way more. Yeah. Yeah, I'll leave it there. So yes, I think it's moving in a really positive direction. I'm thrilled with the Abernathy Bridge project personally, because that third lane is gonna make it faster for me to get up to the city and play with my grandson. So there we go. It's all about me. But that's also a bottleneck with, you know, not having that third lane there, especially on the going uphill, kind of like our Delaney project, when you have freight trying to go uphill. It just really creates all sorts of difficulty for smooth operations. So that's gonna be a great project, especially on the safety side. Looking forward to that one. It was really good to have that conversation just with people from across the state, different projects that are being delivered, different planning efforts that are underway, and just to share resources. So I always appreciate being able to go to and participate in those. Hopefully the next one, be able to go in person. Which is, that's going to be October. Yes, October 28th is the next meeting. Did they say where?
I don't recall.
So we'll need folks to put that on their calendars. I will be able to attend in person. I won't have to be clocking in at aviation anymore. Retiring. I'm not excited. I know Karen's like, whoa. Anyway, so that's going to continue to be a really important networking opportunity. So October 28th is the next one. Other business, our next meeting is going to be on, oh no, the next OTC meeting is going to be hybrid, and September 13th. Our next policy committee meeting is September 27th, and the TACO will be also on the 13th. So I guess they won't be listening in to OTC. Congratulations to Salem. The Rebuilding America Infrastructure with Sustainability and Equity for McGilchrist. Woo! That is a fabulous project. Congratulations. Can't wait to see that one to go to construction.
Julie, you want to say anything?
I second
regarding
that.
the project?
We were shocked, but very happy. And it was our 6th time applying.
6 times the charm.
I know. And this group, you know, has funded a lot of the project that made us actually eligible to get this, including the right of way, the first phase of construction, that we will be going to construction on that phase this coming summer in 2023. The schedule that we submitted with our application showed construction of the remainder in 25 and 26. I am hopeful that that will stick. I did hear that from Eugene that, you know, they received a raise award jointly with Springfield a year ago, and they said that they just got their draft agreement in July. So I'm a little concerned about that, because that might push our schedule, which would then increase the costs because of inflation. So we're going to see what we can do to push things along, see if we can be a squeaky wheel. But I am very excited about that.
Well, fantastic. What a great note to conclude on today. This is a long time project. This has been in the works for a very long time. A lot of efforts gone in, a lot of collaboration with all the property owners on that corridor. Congratulations. Woo! All right, anything else for the good of the order today? Well, thank you all for great work.
Yeah.
The time is now 1:54 and we are adjourned. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thank you, staff. As always, great packet and great materials. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Sadie. Take care.